Hello everybody and welcome back to the program. My name is Kai Rasmussen and this is the Razzy Show. Today on the show, guys, we're going to be talking about the Stanley Cup Finals and a little bit of a recap of it. Both teams were excellent and I felt that it was really, really good hockey, and I'm going to talk a lot about the finals themselves. I'm also going to get into a little bit of a recap on the Stanley Cup playoffs in general. Every team that was in it, the teams I felt did well, the teams that I felt didn't do very well, and the little things that made the difference in some series. We're also going to end the show off with my thoughts on the teams that made the playoffs that I don't think will next year, the teams that made the playoffs that I think will do better next year, and then the teams that didn't make the playoffs that I think that can this year. And I feel that there's a lot of things that could be different for next season. So with that said, here we go. Well, guys, what a Stanley Cup final that was, and I feel that the team that won was the right team. Let's be honest, guys. It was an unbelievable series, except for maybe game 5 and 6. But the Florida Panthers, they finished it up. They were the team that should have won, and they were the team that did win. And let's be honest, there's quite a few reasons why. I feel some of them were self-sabotaging in terms of the Oilers, and that they ran out of gas in a lot of ways. I think that the Zach Hyman factor was huge in this series. But let's be honest, the biggest reason why the Florida Panthers won this series, in my opinion, was the coaching battle. I felt that they got out-coached 100%, and as much as Paul Maurice said it was only 5% coaching, I feel it was much more than that, just because of the simple fact that Chris Knobloch could not do anything differently to get his team over that hump. And every single game, Paul Maurice and his staff had this team ready to play. They shut down McDavid and Draisaitl. They did everything that coaches need to do and more. And that's why, like I said, I feel not only do I agree that they did their job, but they more than did their job. They are elite coaches, all of them, and they deserve to win the Stanley Cup just as much as the players do, because they were extremely impactful, not only in this series, but throughout the playoffs and the season. Hats off to Paul Maurice and their staff, because they were incredible. With that said as well, I feel that the inexperience of Chris Knobloch showed, and he'll figure it out. He's a really smart coach. I think that he has the voice of the players, and I think that he is very, very smart in terms of getting the best out of players. What I feel he lacked in the experience of in this series was he was not ready for a staff like Paul Maurice's. He did not know how to counterbalance what they were throwing at them. He did not know how to change things to get McDavid going, Draisaitl going. He was not able to calm their defense down and do different things in their own zone to counterbalance the forecheck of the Florida Panthers, because let's be honest, that was a huge, huge factor in this series. I also feel the biggest part of his coaching blunders were, like I said earlier, he was not able to help this team in terms of the discipline factor. Guys like Evander Kane should not have been on the ice with Matthew Tkachuk, especially after what you saw throughout Game 1 and the hot-headedness with just being in the same vicinity as Matthew Tkachuk. And Tkachuk didn't have to do anything to get this guy off his game. I felt that Evander Kane was not only a non-factor in every way, shape, or form in a positive way for his team, but he was so detrimental in others that there's no way he should have been on the ice at any time. Never mind with Matthew Tkachuk, who clearly was living rent-free in his brain, and it showed. And that's a lack of coaching experience, in my opinion, because he needed to not only, like I said, not put him on the ice with Matthew Tkachuk, but I think he needed to find a way to put him in the press box. But at the same time as well, I feel they really wanted his physical game, but they just weren't getting it out of him because all he wanted to do was fight Matthew Tkachuk. And let's be honest, that doesn't win you hockey games at this point in the season, especially when you're talking about a team like the Florida Panthers who will bait you all day long. They are unbelievable at doing that, and it showed in this series. And hats off to them, 100% for the coaching. The depth of this Florida Panthers team was also a huge, huge reason why they won this series. When Paul Maurice can look down the bench and see 3 solid lines that he could throw at you at any point in time, that's a real advantage. And they did similar things. Every single one of those lines, they were incredible. Absolutely incredible throughout the playoffs. And let's be honest, that 4th line was very impactful as well. Especially in that Carolina series. You know, their ability to make impactful plays and do the things that were necessary when needed every time they were put on the ice was incredible, because they weren't on the ice much. And like I said, to me, that's coaching. And it's not just Paul Maurice, it's the entirety of the staff, because they got the best out of these men, and it really, really showed. The depth of this team, though, was a major factor in this series and throughout the playoffs for the Florida Panthers. But a huge, huge factor in this series, and it really sucks to say this. I don't like saying this against the Edmonton Oilers, because it sucks to question people's characters, but the lack of courage and the abundance of courage for the Florida Panthers was evident in this series, especially Game 5 and 6. The Oilers had no courage in those 2 games. I felt even in Game 4 at times they lacked courage compared to the Florida Panthers. The unwillingness to go into the corners like they should, the unwillingness to finish their checks like they should, the unwillingness to make that extra step and take a hit to make a play. They were not doing those things, especially in Game 5 and 6, and unfortunately, that's where the Florida Panthers beat every team, was their abundance of courage, their willingness to do whatever it took to win. And that's why they're 2-time Stanley Cup champions, guys, is they had the courage to do whatever it took. And that, let's be honest, in many ways, shapes, and forms, is the difference in winning and losing when you get to that level. And the Florida Panthers, 100%, were the more courageous team throughout that series. And unfortunately for the Oilers, they're going to really have to soul search. I think the lack of depth, though, is what caught up with them in terms of that courage. The biggest thing that will make you afraid and show fear is tiredness. And they were tired. They were fatigued. They did not have that extra gear to play the Florida Panthers. I felt they used it all their 9 lives up getting to the finals. As I said earlier, I don't think that they should have been there. I felt that the LA Kings should have beaten them. And then I was extremely surprised when they beat Vegas. I was extremely surprised when they beat Dallas. And then when you go up against a juggernaut like the Florida Panthers and you just cannot keep going, there's no way you're going to win. And unfortunately, that lack of courage really showed in the finals, like I said. Another huge factor, though, for the Edmonton Oilers was their defensive blunders. And I will say this. I feel the goaltending was inconsistent. I very critical on Stuart Skinner and his inconsistent play throughout the playoffs. And not just this season, but all 3 seasons he's been in the playoffs. I feel that he's been inconsistent, and that is something that needs to be addressed in Edmonton. I do not think they can bring him back because he feels he's a number 1. I do not, and his inconsistency is why. he is too inconsistent to be a number one goaltender in the National Hockey League, and as much as he's shown up and shown brilliance at times, you don't know when you're going to get it. You don't even know when you're going to get an average game out of him, because usually it's either great or absolutely horrendous, and you can't have that. I'd rather have a goaltender that shows up and plays average every game, because that gives you a chance to win, because at least it's consistent and you know what you're getting. You never knew with Stuart Skinner, and a lot of the time, especially, let's be honest, in the finals, they were down 3-0 quick. How do you change momentum? Even that game that Edmonton won, they shouldn't have, because Florida let off the gas. But to me, the reason why they should have lost that game wasn't the Florida Panthers letting off the gas. It was Stuart Skinner giving up 3 goals in the first period. It was terrible. And they really need to improve their goaltending, but the defensive blunders in front of them are absolutely horrendous, and I disagree with Stan Bowman 100% when he says that they don't need to improve anything on their defense. And yes, I agree that they improved in certain areas throughout the season and the playoffs, but their defensive blunders in their own zone, especially moving the puck, were absolutely horrendous. And if you're going to pay a guy like Evan Bouchard, he cannot make plays like he did in his own zone, because that'll cost you games. Every single game. And he does it every single game. And for example, they finally said it in Game 6 on the broadcast. Kevin Bieksa said it. It was great. He cannot be moving up the ice when his defensive partner's in trouble. Ekholm needed to make a play around the boards or deeper across the slot to where it was a safer play. But Bouchard, instead of moving back or moving to the side to the boards, he was moving forwards in that play. Where was he going? Other than trying to make his offensive plays, which, when you're a defenseman, you need to be thinking about defense first. And Evan Bouchard does not. And many players on this Edmonton Oilers team do not. You know, a lot of guys were saying how Wallman was unbelievable in the playoffs and was very impactful for the Oilers and blah, blah, blah. I agree to an extent. But he was one of the worst when it came to blunders, especially throwing the puck up the middle. And it showed in Game 6 as well with that one blunder that he had, throwing the puck up the middle. It ended up in their net, and you can't blame the goalie for that. That's an absolutely horrendous play, and it happened on a consistent basis for the Edmonton Oilers all season long, not just in the playoffs, all season long. And you can't win when you're playing like that on a consistent basis defensively in this league. It's too hard to play defensive hockey, never mind when you're doing things like that to yourself. And the Edmonton Oilers' defensive blunders were absolutely horrendous throughout the playoffs this year, and they need to address that moving forward. Unfortunately for them, I think that their health also caught up with them. The Nuge was not healthy. Everybody knew that. Unfortunately, there was some coaching mistakes with that as well. Why he was taking the face off in Game 6 there, I do not know. Why he was on the ice in certain situations, I do not know. I get it, he was trying. I get it, they needed the bodies out there. I get it that they weren't deep enough to potentially put somebody else in. But he was hurt, and you could tell. He was not the same player whatsoever. I do wonder if Connor McDavid was hurt, because he just didn't seem as explosive as he once was in the playoffs. So you can attribute a lot of things in the Edmonton Oilers' loss I feel, though, the biggest two things were the goaltending and the defensive blunders. You could add the coaching inexperience as well, but the defensive blunders and the goaltending were absolutely horrendous for this Edmonton Oilers team, and in my opinion, that's why they did not advance to be the Stanley Cup champions, and I'm still surprised that they made it there, to be quite frank. Good on them. Congratulations to them for doing that, but they need to make a lot of changes in terms of their depth. They're too old, and I'm going to get into, at the end of the program here, teams that I feel will do worse next season, and they're one of the teams on my list. So with that said, guys, we're going to move on to the Stanley Cup playoffs and the summary of that. So guys, round one was unbelievable, and I felt that it was the most entertaining round of these playoffs. I generally feel that round 1 and 2 are the more exciting rounds, and especially round 1, though, with this new format in the National Hockey League. Well, it's not too old. It's been around for quite some time now, but the newer format in the playoffs in the National Hockey League. And like I said, it was fantastic again, round 1. I felt that there was a lot of teams that I don't understand what happened. Talking earlier, the LA Kings were one of those teams that I thought they were going to beat the Edmonton Oilers, and then suddenly they just collapsed, and I don't understand what happened to that team. And obviously Rob Blake and the LA Kings mutually decided to part ways, and that's only one domino that's going to fall. I think we're going to see many others fall here in the off season. I think they're going to make a lot of moves just because of the simple fact that what happened. And for me, I don't even know, because somehow this team that felt like they had so much control in that series just fell off the map. And unfortunately for them, and fortunately for the Edmonton Oilers, Edmonton just turned it on, and LA just fell off a cliff. And it's unbelievable, especially because I felt they had the goaltending. I felt they were a bigger, more physical team, and I felt that they had the youth factor that was going to be able to get them over the hump. And like I said, in those first two games, they were unbelievable. I also felt that there was a bunch of series that were underwhelming in terms of certain teams. In the Dallas-Colorado series, I felt that Colorado was underwhelming. They just offensively were not the team that I felt that they should be. I felt that throughout the season, though. If you look at McKinnon, it's unbelievable, this stat here, guys. He had 116 points. The closest guy to him was Makar with 92, which obviously that makes sense. Makar is unbelievable, Norris Trophy winner, all that. But then the third guy, and the guy that was closest to those two throughout the season, only played till the trade deadline or not even the trade deadline with them, because he got traded to Carolina before then, was Mikko Rantanen with 64 points. Then Lankinen was the third guy after Rantanen got shipped out with 45. That's a major gap, guys. 116 and 92 and then 45. That shows that their lack of depth offensively was horrendous. I felt that their goaltending was okay, but their lack of offense really showed in the playoffs, and they're going to have to do something. Perhaps Natchez, because he did have 28 points in 30 games with them in the regular season, and he had a decent playoffs with them. He did have a total 83 points throughout the regular season with Colorado and Carolina, but he needs to be more impactful. I think he will be, but they also need to add some other offense to this team, because when you have that much of a gap, clearly Nathan MacKinnon needs somebody to help him. And that's why I feel that they were underwhelming in the playoffs. don't get me wrong, I'm not going to take anything away from Dallas because they were a top team, and that was one of the funner series to watch, more fun series to watch. But with that said, I also feel that Colorado needs to be better. St. Louis was another team that, without that 12-game winning streak, they didn't make the playoffs. And I think that they ran out of gas. They ran out of a lot of other things just trying to get to the playoffs. And they were very underwhelming in that first series. I felt the Jets were by far the more superior team, and it showed. And unfortunately for St. Louis, like I said, I think they put all their chips in on getting to the playoffs, and they were very underwhelming in the playoffs. Another huge one that was underwhelming was the New Jersey Devils, and I feel it was mostly because of the Jack Hughes factor. Again, same thing as Colorado, in my opinion. I just felt that the offense was not there, and a huge part of that, in my opinion, was the lack of Jack Hughes. The Montreal Canadiens, let's be honest, guys, same with the Ottawa Senators, I think. Both those teams did not have enough experience, and it showed in these playoffs. They tried their best. They played some really good hockey at times, but the lack of experience and the superior opponents that they were playing against, because let's be honest, Montreal, they went up against a team that was really good in the Washington Capitals, and obviously Ottawa going up against Toronto. Everybody thought that Toronto was going to win that series. I felt that Ottawa did a really good job stretching it to 6. But again, their lack of experience showed, and they'll be better next year, I think, though. Tampa, I think they ran up against, obviously, the juggernaut that is the 2-time Cup champions, but they also showed that they need to retool. This is not the team that won 2 straight Cups. This is not the team that once was the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I think they're going to have to retool quite a bit here in the off season. Not drastically, but definitely going to have to make some moves here in the off season to get back to at least a little bit of what they were, because I think they took a lot of steps back this season. And I think they have all the main pieces to get it done. They just, like I said, need to retool a little bit, and I think that's going to help them, and it'll be really, really good for this team to take a look in the mirror and redo some things, because I think they were just not deep enough to play against a team like the Florida Panthers, plain and simple. And let's be honest, too, they were just underwhelming offensively and defensively as well. They weren't good enough in these playoffs, and they're going to have to redo some things. When you move to the second round, though, I feel that the Vegas Golden Knights, and I probably should have said this in the underwhelming teams as well, they were a little bit underwhelming in the first round. I do feel, though, that their lack of offense against the Edmonton Oilers is what was the difference in that series. I felt that they were more physical. They out-hit them in every game except one. Unfortunately, though, and this is the stat that blows my mind, they just did not shoot the puck. And all you had to do is shoot the puck at Stuart Skinner and you can score. And they did not shoot the puck. They got outshot in every game. So I don't know how you not throw the puck at the net. That's especially against a team like the Edmonton Oilers, who have shaky goaltending. You're a bigger, stronger team. You should have been able to just throw the puck at the net and make things happen, and Vegas was trying to be too cute. And I think that was their downfall with their lack of offense. I felt Washington was the same way. They just ran into a team in Carolina that was mean in front of their own net, and they couldn't do the things that Washington does offensively, and it really showed. The Leafs' lack of depth was also a huge factor against the Florida Panthers. I felt that they really needed to do better, and they did not. in terms of forechecking and doing those things that I talked about earlier in the show about the Oilers not being able to do, which was be courageous. And then the one team in the second round that really, really bothered me was the Winnipeg Jets. When you got the MVP and the Vezina Trophy winner on your team, you should be able to have some offensive struggles and still have a chance to win. Unfortunately, Hellebuyck doesn't show up in the playoffs. And it's a good thing that the Vezina and the MVP are a regular season award, because if you include the playoffs with that, he shouldn't have won the MVP because he was not the same guy in the playoffs. 905 save percentage is not good enough to be the guy that you need to be in the finals, or in the playoffs, I should say, to get you to the finals. And this team, in my opinion, is built around Connor Hellebuyck. So when you're not showing up, how's your team going to win? And I think Hellebuyck was the biggest reason why the Jets did not do their thing in the second round. Don't get me wrong, Dallas was very good in that series as well, and the lack of offense showed that from the Winnipeg Jets. But let's be honest, if Connor Hellebuyck is a little bit more like the regular season Connor Hellebuyck, this team has a chance to win. And unfortunately, he doesn't give them that chance in the playoffs like he does in the regular season. And that's why a team like this that's built around him being elite doesn't succeed as much when he's not elite. And it showed. The third round was, I feel, the round that was the least exciting, especially in the Western Conference. I felt that there is no way that the Edmonton Oilers should have beaten the Dallas Stars. I felt that 100% the Edmonton Oilers did beat the Dallas Stars by frustrating them, by exposing their weaknesses, by just playing better. But Dallas, I felt, collapsed in many ways, just like the LA Kings did. They were self-sabotaging, and you cannot tell me that the Game 6 pulling of Ottinger was the only reason that Pete DeBoer got fired. There was much more behind that pulling. There was much more behind that public scrutiny that he came out with after the game. All the things that were said in the player meetings after the season with the general manager that ultimately led to DeBoer getting fired, I think those were all factors in that series, because the Edmonton Oilers, if anything that they did in that series extremely, extremely well, was expose the weaknesses and the lack of togetherness that the Dallas Stars had in their locker room. And maybe that was the head coach. Maybe that was the fact that these younger guys weren't looking at the leaders the same way that they should be. I'm not sure. But something was going wrong in the Dallas Stars locker room, and it's a lot bigger than what we know. It's a lot bigger than what I think anybody's ever going to find out. But there were some major problems, in my opinion, in the Dallas Stars locker room, because this team is so good. And I don't understand how the Edmonton Oilers beat them, other than the fact that they, in more ways than one, collapsed and were a shell of what they should have been. And again, I'll give props to the Edmonton Oilers because they frustrated them and they did a lot of things well in that series. Unfortunately, though, Dallas was the better team. They just did not play better, and that's what matters when you get to that point in the series or the season. In the Florida Carolina series, though, for those who don't like defensive hockey, it wasn't for you. But I'm one that loves off defensive hockey, and Florida took Carolina's game and played the Uno card. And they were unbelievable defensively. Carolina cannot score on a good day, which is something they're going to have to address majorly in the offseason because, again, they are not good offensively on a good day. And then when you run into a team like the Florida Panthers, it's really hard to score, and they frustrated the Carolina Hurricanes 100% defensively because when you forecheck like Florida does, Carolina couldn't play their defensive game anymore. And that's, again, going back to earlier comments, Paul Maurice and his staff were unbelievable at doing that, I felt, throughout the playoffs, and that Carolina series was probably the one where they exploited that the most. And it was very, very interesting to watch that collapse defensively of the Carolina Hurricanes because every time I've watched these Rod Brind'Amour teams play, that's what you get, is a very disciplined, sound defensive hockey team that doesn't take many penalties, that doesn't do many things poorly in their own zone. Unfortunately, Florida made them. And again, to me, that's coaching mostly. They do have the horses in Florida to do it, and yes, that is a huge factor, but the way that the system is structured and the way that they made adjustments to take Carolina off their game from a coaching perspective, I think was massive in that series. And I'm not going to say that Rod Brind'Amour got out coached. I think he got out schemed because I feel that Paul Maurice's scheme was able to counteract Carolina's scheme, and his scheme won. And let's be honest, players played a huge factor in that, but the scheme was a major factor as well. So with that said, they were unbelievable rounds of the playoffs, guys, and as much as the finals was great, all three rounds were really good as well, and I expect that next season we're going to get some extremely good hockey, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen next year. So guys, we're going to wrap this program up with the final thought, and that is, which one do we think is not going to make it that made the playoffs this year? Which one do we think that is going to do worse? Which ones do we feel that are going to do better that made the playoffs this year? And which ones that didn't make it this season do I think that are going to make it next? And there's three in each. So to start off, let's go with the ones that are not going to be in that made the playoffs this season. I feel St. Louis shouldn't have been in the playoffs this year, and I definitely feel that next year they're not going to make the playoffs. I just feel that they're not a deep enough team, and I feel that they got lucky to make the playoffs this year. They play in a really, really tough division, and I feel that there's no way that this division is going to be a 3-team race or a 4-team race. I think it's going to be a 6 to 7-team race in this division. That's how good the Central is, and I just don't think that St. Louis can do it. The second team is in that division as well, and that's the Colorado Avalanche. I really feel the lack of offense on this team, unless they really go out and address something in the offseason offensively, that they just don't have enough offense. They can't rely on Makar and McKinnon. It's just something they cannot do. I feel that point gap that I talked about earlier, going from the 116-92 of Makar and McKinnon to 45 of Lankinen. And sure, some will say, well, Nature's had 83 total. Well, yeah, okay, you can add that in there, but still, there's still a major gap from 83 to 45, and that's something that really needs to be addressed for the Colorado Avalanche, and I don't know if they can address it as much as they need to. And those other teams, especially Nashville and especially the Mammoth, I think the Mammoth are improving. It's going to be a really tough division in the Central, and I think Colorado, with their lack of offense, is going to struggle to make the playoffs next year. They could, but I also think they couldn't, and it's going to be a interesting season next year to see the Central, and I honestly think that the St. Louis Blues and Colorado Avalanche are two teams that made it this season that won't make it next season. The third team is the Montreal Canadiens, and I say that just because I think that they got lucky in a lot of ways this season. I think that they're going to continue taking steps forward in their rebuilding process, but I think they really need to improve this team in terms of leadership, because I feel that they didn't have enough leadership this season, and it's really hard to add leadership to your team that meshes well. And I don't know if they take steps back or forwards by doing that next season. We'll see. Obviously, they're a team that could, but I also think that they're the one team in the East that probably won't make the playoffs that did this season. Teams that are going to do worse. I think the Toronto Maple Leafs are one that potentially could be on that list with Montreal. As much as some people think I'm crazy to say that, but they need to make a lot of moves this season. And I don't think they're re-signing Tavares. I don't think they're re-signing Mitch Marner. Those are two major players for this team, and as much as they still have a ton of talent without those two, especially if they lose those two for nothing, that's a big step back in your organization. And I feel the Toronto Maple Leafs are definitely going to be worse next season. I still think they could make the playoffs, but I don't think they are good enough to make it past the first round if they do make the playoffs. So Toronto Maple Leafs 100% are going to be worse, I think. The Washington Capitals, I just don't see them having the team that they did this year. I feel they ran that OV goal streak. I think that they had a lot of guys that had comeback seasons and whatnot that aren't going to have good seasons next year. Dubois being the one I'm talking about the most. So I feel that the Washington Capitals are definitely going to regress, and to the point where they might not make the playoffs, but I think they will. But I don't think they're going to be a second round team next year. I think they'll be a first round group, and that's as good as they'll be. And then the Edmonton Oilers as well. I think they're good enough, especially with the Pacific being the way that it is. I still think they can make the playoffs. I think the Pacific's still going to be bad next year. So I think they'll still make the playoffs, but they're going to not be as good of a team as they were this year for many different reasons, unless they improve some things drastically. And from what Stan Bowman was saying, their biggest thing that they need to improve is their defense, and Stan Bowman doesn't want to do that. So I think they're going to be a worse team next year in terms of how they finish in the playoffs. Teams that I think are going to do better in the playoffs next year are the Winnipeg Jets, for one. I feel, like I said, that if this team figures out how to get Connor Hellebuyck playing the way that he should be in the playoffs, this team is an unbelievable team. And he wins you games. He's just got to figure out how to be the same guy that he is in the regular season in the playoffs, and perhaps he can do that. Perhaps a guy like Jonathan Toews can help him, because a lot of it's in between the ears, guys. And I think that if he can figure that out, they're going to do much better in the playoffs next year. The Dallas Stars, guys, regardless of whatever coach they bring in, they've been to three straight conference finals, I should say. I think they can find the guy that'll get them over the hump. I feel that they can make the little tinks and twinkers that they need to in the off season to get them to another level. I think Ottinger can play a lot better in the playoffs himself. I think that with some of the cap room that they're going to have because of Jamie Benn's deal being up, that they're going to be able to make some different moves. Yeah, I think the Dallas Stars are going to do much better in the playoffs next year, and that means that they're going to make the finals, in my prediction. The other one, I think, is Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't know if they can decrown the two-time champs yet, but I definitely think they make it out of the first round. And Tampa is a team, like I said in the previous comment, that I feel that they're a team that needs to retool. I think they can, though. I think they have the core in place, just like a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs, where they can still be a playoff team, and they can, in my opinion, do better, because, let's be honest, they got one of the best goalies in the world. They got Kucherov. This team is a very, very good hockey team, and I think they just need a little bit of time to retool here in the offseason, and I think doing that, they'll be able to be a better team in the playoffs next year. The three teams that I think that could make it, a lot of people are going to say I'm a homer because I'm a Flames fan, but I really think they're doing something special here in Calgary this time. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they take a step back. Maybe they don't get some of the lucky breaks that they got throughout the season. But this team, they were a really good team, in my opinion, throughout this regular season, and I think they're only going to get better. And I feel with the weak Pacific Division and teams like LA not going to be as good next year, I don't think. I think that they can make the playoffs. I really do. And as much as, like I said, people might call me a homer for that, I really feel that the Calgary Flames are going to be better next season and can have the potential to make the playoffs. A team that I still have no idea what happened to them other than chemistry or locker room issues or coaching issues or whatever it was. The Nashville Predators are going to be better next year, guys. I truly feel that. Again, there was obviously a meshing issue with them, but if they can get Stamkos going, if they can get a healthy Roman Josi, which who knows if that's going to happen with this illness that they've reported with him, but I feel that the Nashville Predators can be a playoff team next year. And maybe I'm wrong, but I really do. I feel that the Nashville Predators can be a better team next year, and I think that they can be good enough to make the playoffs, especially over a team like St. Louis. And I think, as crazy as this might sound, I think that Colorado's lack of offense might be the difference in terms of playoffs, in terms of Nashville either making it or not, or Colorado making it or not. And like I said, it's a bold prediction, but I feel that Nashville can rebound and make the playoffs next year. Another one that might be a dark horse for some, because I felt that they were very close this year. They could have beat out Montreal if they played a little bit better at times in the season, and that's the Columbus Blue Jackets. I feel they have a lot of different things going well for them in their organization, and as much as losing Johnny really hurt, I think they are a very good team, and if they can add some things in the offseason, they're going to be an even better team next year, and I do feel they can make the playoffs. With that said, guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. This program is only going to get better. I am new at this, so I hope you enjoyed. Please like and share.